You know the scene, right? If you live anywhere that gets real winters, you've seen it. The big trucks come out, laying down tons and tons of salt to keep the roads clear. It's just what happens in winter. But in a massive city like Chicago, that familiar sight adds up to a staggering amount of salt. And today, we're going to follow that salt based on some new research and figure out its secret journey.
All right, so this is the central question that gets everything started. Every single winter, the greater Chicago area dumps nearly 1 million tons of salt on its roads. I mean, just try to picture that. 1 million tons. But have you ever really thought about what happens to it after the snow melts? I mean, it doesn't just vanish, right? So where on earth is it all going?
To even begin to answer that, we've got to wrap our heads around the sheer scale of this whole thing. And that brings us to our first part, our winter salt habit. So this isn't some new thing, but what's crazy is how much it's grown. The research shows that just between 1990 and 2020, the amount of road salt being used in the Chicago region jumped by a massive 33%. Yeah, we're using more and more of this stuff every single year. So who's actually putting all the salt down? Well, it's easy to just picture the big state highway plows, but that's only part of the story. Turns out local towns and cities are the biggest users, at almost half. And check this out, private companies, the folks who salt the mall parking lots and your office complex, they account for almost a quarter of it. It's really a collective effort, from the state all the way down to private businesses. Okay, so we've established that a colossal amount of salt is being used, and logically, you'd think we could track where it goes. But this is where our investigation takes a really weird turn. Welcome to Section 2, the missing salt mystery. I mean, the first suspect is pretty obvious, right? It's gotta be the rivers. The snow and ice melt, all that salty slush gets washed into the storm drains, and boom, it all flows out into the Chicago River system. Seems like a simple open and shut case. But when the researchers actually did the math, when they balanced the books, so to speak, it just didn't add up. And this, right here, is the heart of the mystery. On the left, you see the total amount of chloride, that's the key chemical in salt, that we put on the landscape every year. About 1,480 kilotons, a huge number. But on the right, that's what scientists actually measure flowing out of the region's rivers, and it's only about 1,000 kilotons. There's this massive gap between what we're putting in and what's actually coming out. And that gap, it amounts to this number, 480,000 tons of salt. That's just unaccounted for. It's going into the environment, but it's not leaving through the rivers. Every single year. So this is the big question, right? If it's not all just washing away into the rivers, where is this massive salt surplus hiding? It has to be somewhere. Well, it turns out the answer isn't on the surface at all. The salt has been seeping down, creating a hidden problem deep underground. Which brings us to Section 3, a salty legacy underground. And this missing salt, it has a name. Scientists call it legacy chloride. And you can kind of think of it like a pollution savings account that we never wanted. See, each winter salt doesn't just wash away. A huge chunk of it actually soaks down into the ground, where it just stays. It accumulates year after year, continuing to pollute our water long, long after the winter it was first used. So how exactly does this work? Well, in the shallow groundwater, we're talking less than 100 feet deep or so, the salt causes a big spike in the winter, but that system is active enough that it mostly flushes itself out by the summer. Okay, but the story completely changes when you go deeper. Below 100 feet, that salt starts to get trapped. It's not flushing out. Instead, the deep groundwater is acting like a giant sponge, slowly but surely becoming a permanent reservoir for decades of our road salt. And the evidence for this? It's just undeniable. Take a look at the historical data for that deep groundwater. Back in the 1960s, the median chloride level was just 7 milligrams per liter. Pretty clean, huh? Today, it has skyrocketed to 52. That's more than a 7-fold increase. We are literally watching our deep aquifers get saltier and saltier over time. So, we've got a massive amount of salt being stored deep underground, and it's creating a problem that's going to last way longer than any single winter. Let's dig into the consequences in our next section, the long thaw. Okay, get ready for this number. According to the study's estimates, the total amount of this legacy chloride that has built up in the Chicago landscape just since 1990 is a staggering 14 million tons. That's an almost unimaginable amount of pollution just stored right underneath the city. So, why is this such a big deal? Well, for one, it confirms that our groundwater is the main storage tank for all this old salt. And that creates a direct, long-term threat to drinking water quality, not to mention the health of freshwater ecosystems that depend on that groundwater. But here's the really scary part. This problem is now baked into the system. It's going to be with us for decades, even if we stop using salt tomorrow. In fact, right now, about 9% of all the wells sampled in the area already exceed the EPA's secondary drinking water standards for chloride. So this isn't some future problem, it's happening right now.
And this really puts the challenge we're facing into sharp focus. A quote from the study's own summary says it all. Even if less salt is used in the future, it will take a long time for the system to recover. We've essentially created this slow-moving environmental problem that is going to take generations to fix if we can fix it at all.
So we're left with this really sobering reality. The salt that we spread on the roads back in the 90s is actively polluting our water right now, today. And that forces us to ask a really tough question. What will the choices we make this winter, the salt we spread this year, mean for the water our children and grandchildren drink in the year 2050? And that is Chicago's salty secret, a legacy we're building one winter at a time.